Hi, terHart. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Elijah, it's a real treat to be here, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you today.
Beautiful, and thank you for being here. Okay, terHart, you see, I love to thank my guests for two main things. Firstly, terHart, I want to thank you for investing in yourself. You see, you are on this platform currently because you invested in yourself. And oftentimes, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, I was passing by a mango tree some months back, and this particular mango tree didn't really catch my attention. Why? Because it's got no fruit on it. And I just walked past it because no, it ain't attractive at all. And just recently, I was on that same road. But this time around, something different happened. You see, I sighted the mango tree from afar. And I got this urge to move closer, to have a good look. And when I got closer, man, I was wowed because now the mango tree looks all beautiful because it's got a lot of mangoes in it. And I was
Yeah,
excited. I was smiling. I'm like, yeah, this is beautiful. Now the point is the fact that Tehat dedicated his time, energy, and resources to becoming who you are today. That alone attracted me to you. And you see, I just couldn't take my eyes off the amazing things I was reading about you. And that's why you got the request to be on the show. So thank you so very much, Dehat, for investing in yourself. Thank you so very much.
thank
And yeah, beautiful. And secondly, thank you for honoring the invite. I truly appreciate it. Thank you,
mm,
man.
mm.
Okay, to get started, you see, I'm quite excited to have you on the show, Tehab, for some reasons. All right, firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking, because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality
Mm,
information. And you
mm.
see, Tehad, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the audience. Now, the second reason why I'm excited to have the amazing Tara on the show is for the sake of the listeners. You see, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got a lot of information flying out there. How to do this, how to do that. So those folks trust me for quality information. And that's why when I came across your profile, I was excited because I believe our conversation is going to be insightful
Mm.
and impactful. So for that
Mhm.
reason, Tara, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or professional journey. We're just so curious. We want to know how you got here. And afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Tehat, over to you.
Okay, well, that's a tough act to follow. Again, thanks, Elisha, for the space and for getting me on the show. I'm really excited. I can imagine where this conversation is going to go because my own background is a little bit, let's say, varied. So I started out as a soldier with the Canadian Special Service Forces. I then became a scientist studying large scale oceanic waves. So I was a physical oceanographer. And then because I had programming skills, basically computer modeling skills, I became sought after as a programmer, which basically turned my life around. I ended up owning a couple of different software companies, and then that's where I've spent most of my adult life as an entrepreneur and a professional working within the healthcare niche. But I've always had my parents were Dutch. They immigrated to Canada from Holland, and my father actually sailed and rowed to school, and his father and my uncles, they were all associated with the sea in some way, shape, or form. So I guess I have salt water running in my veins. So I've always been a sailor at heart. So one of the things that seems to attract people, that seems to gain some traction with people, is my story with respect to my adventure. So I've sailed solo around the world nonstop. First North or South American to do that, only the ninth person in the world to do it. Well, at the time, the ninth person. There's since been a couple others. I didn't use any electronic navigation at all, just a sextant, a compass, and pen and paper. When I came back, I paddled across Canada from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. That's 7,800 kilometers. It's a bit of a long trip. Again, by myself, solo. Again, without any electronic navigation, just maps and compass. I've sailed all over the Pacific, Northwest Pacific, following in the steps some of the greatest explorers and cartographers that the world might know. So that would be Cook and Vancouver and Bligh here in Canada. That their contemporaries would have been the people who literally put Canada on the maps. My father, after his career as in the merchant marine, he became a land surveyor because surveying on the making a map of the of land is pretty much the same as navigating at the time that my father was doing it. He used the same instrumentation, the same math. So I came by all those things naturally as a result of being incredibly fortunate to grow up in a place where that was allowed, and then to have a family life that sort of emboldened me to try crazy things all the time. So it's been a wild journey, and there's been lots of twists and turns along the way. And I think we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes to finding knowledge and beauty in the things that are around you, despite how difficult the circumstances might be, or how wild and crazy they might be. So I'm really looking forward into delving into some of those things that might resonate either with you or your audience.
Amazing. You see, when I was reading the stuffs about you, I was like, wait a minute, you did this? Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So let's begin from here, all right? Let's begin with
Mm-hmm.
the inspiration, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What inspired your passion for oceans and exploration? You mentioned your dad and he sailed and all of that. I want you to talk more on the inspiration behind it.
Well, I think I've always had a technical mind, and I think I got that from my father. I mentioned he was a surveyor. My mom was she spoke 5 languages, and she was incredibly accomplished in her own right. So I was lucky to be let's say I was lucky to have uh, parents who would allow me to dig into those things that I was curious about. So they never said no to anything that I might want to do, whether it was, stumbling around in some valley looking for fossils, or getting getting into a into a canoe and paddling to the other end of the down the river to go explore. So I was very lucky. And as a young boy, I worked with my father. So he would take me out into the middle of the prairies where we would be doing whatever surveyors do, and he had a very deep appreciation for nature and for what was in his immediate environment. So my dad had a unique ability to be completely embedded in the now, which I would describe as being able to slough off all those things that typically weigh you down, that typically act as anchors that would prevent you from appreciating everything that there is around you. And it's an easy thing to say, but if you step outside and just start literally looking at the smallest possible thing, and that doesn't fill you with wonder, then I'm not sure what possibly can, because we're surrounded by this incredible mystery all the time, and yet we take it for granted. So my father was able to somehow, even in the middle of the winter, the middle of whatever he was doing, he would see an arrowhead, or he would see something that was out of the ordinary, something that shouldn't be there, and it would just capture his attention just like that. And I marveled at that, and I think I picked up on that. So the things that I've done, I was able to be successful, I think, because I could be completely embedded in the now. So the situation would dictate what I would have to do. So I learned what I could control and what I couldn't control. That stems from my father's ability to step back from whatever he was doing, look at the situation that was presented. I'm not talking in the context of my father. He wasn't looking at situations that were particularly dire, but he was able to appreciate everything that was around him. Certainly those things that are laying at his feet, for example. Literally looking down at the ground and finding evidence of people that had lived there, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, because that's in the place that I grew up. Those kinds of artifacts are literally everywhere. The ground is literally littered with them. And if you simply look down with an open heart and an open mind, you can find these things. So suddenly you have this very deep, meaningful connection that goes, and that thread goes back, millennia, thousands and thousands of years. And you're able to tap into that in some way, shape, or form. And you can do that if you stop, live in the moment, which is to say, this is where I am, this is what I'm doing right now. And if I just absorb that moment, then there's all this entire other universe opens up to you. It's not this, I mean, maybe this is a little bit outside your question, but this idea of living in the now, that doesn't collapse your being. Like I just referred to, it expands it. So if I'm walking, again where I grew up, if I'm walking down the prairie and I look down and I see a little piece of flint which has been worked by some human perhaps 2,000 years ago, suddenly I'm now connected to that human, the last person that may have touched that 2,000 years ago. Of course, I don't know who that is, but I'm part of that thread now. I'm part of that whole experience. So instead of my world collapsing into, me just looking at the ground and everything else, the blinders come on, suddenly your whole universe just blows up. And that process is transformative in ways that you can't possibly imagine, depending, of course, on the circumstance that you find yourself in.
Amazing. You are a great dad, and you took after him. I love that. I love that. It's a great
Yeah.
inspiration, I tell you. Okay. You see, I'm so curious now. Okay. I want to know what motivated you to paddle across Canada from the Pacific to Atlantic Oceans. You get that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that, I mean, you have to have many reasons why. It doesn't matter what you do. Everything is going to be hard. Life is not supposed to be easy. It's, it just isn't. If it were, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. There are no shortcuts. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's always pay me now or pay me later. So that's kind of a long way of saying that you have to have many motivations, many reasons why, because if you only have one, the minute it gets hard, you will quit because you will have used up your one why. And the next time it gets hard, there'll be nothing left there's nothing left in the tank. There's nothing left for you to lean on. So you have to have a lot of whys. So you have to be motivated on a bunch of different, on a bunch of different levels and across an entire spectrum. The paddle across Canada was motivated, curiously enough, by the sail, by my trip around the world, because one of the reasons I went around the world, I mean, one of them, certainly not the primary one, but certainly one of them that's in context of the paddle, is I was following literally in the wake of everyone who ever came to this coast back in the day that Canada was being put on the map. So, and I mean, I shouldn't say Canada, but basically all of North America. And that happened in a very, very short period of time. So I mentioned some of the people earlier. So that would be Cook and Vancouver and Bligh, and the Spaniards, the Frenchmen, of course, La Perouse, Bodega de Quadra. The Spanish, of course, were on the northwest coast of North America. But the mapping of that only took place in a very short period of time. So it's all, the mappings of the ocean, primarily by Cook, because everyone seems to know his name, and then his contemporaries were guys who had put Canada on the map. So that would be David Thompson, Alexander Mackenzie, Peter Fiddler, Peter Turner. The list goes on and on. They were all contemporaries using exactly the same techniques. It was all done with a sextant, all done with pencil and paper. I shouldn't say charcoal, basically, and scraps of paper or birch bark. And this happened in a very short period of time. So I followed in the oceanic wakes of those great explorers, and then to close the loop, I went across Canada and along those same routes. Part of the reason was I'm a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and Explorer in Residence, or the 2022 Explorer in Residence for the BC Historical Society. So one of my goals was to raise awareness to the roles that Indigenous people had played in putting Canada on the map. So all these fantastic experiences, or all these fantastic accomplishments by the people that I've named, certainly the people that did this on land. So that would be, again, Mackenzie and his gang, and Fraser and Thompson and all those guys. Their work would have been impossible had it not been for the help, or I shouldn't say just the help, because that underestimates the role they played. But everything that was laid at their feet by Indigenous people, and not just Indigenous people, but all that work would have been impossible had it not been for women. So, of course, we know Alexander Mackenzie, but we don't know. We know next to nothing about the Indigenous people that actually made his journeys and all his discoveries and all his cartographic exploits and achievements possible. So there's a couple of whys for you. And I had thousands of kids from all over the world follow both trips. So there's another why for you. You don't want to let all these kids down. So I had very many whys, and depending on, circumstance, I would lean on different ones at different times, depending, depending how things were going. So
I got that. I got that. And I just learned something new. You've got to have
yeah,
many whys, okay? Don't just rely
yes, you
on one
do.
thing to keep you motivated. I got that.
Hmm.
Okay, let's get to the part I've been waiting for. All right. So can you share the most memorable moment from your solo non-stop sail around the
Hmm.
world? Can you share
Okay,
some memorable moments with us?
yeah. So that's an interesting question, because, as I've alluded to, I'm a bit of a technical guy. So obviously, using a sextant, it's basically a math problem. Computer programming is basically a math problem. Growing a business it's almost a math problem, because it can be pedantic. So I'm in the middle of the South Indian Ocean, about, I don't know, 2,500 miles south of India. So the nearest person to me is 2,000 miles straight up, and I'm thousands and thousands of miles away from land. And I was between storms. So the way that it works in the Southern Ocean is that it's beautiful, and then it's horrible, and then it's beautiful, and then it's horrible. Beautiful, horrible, beautiful, horrible. There is no, in the Northern Hemisphere, we have this gradual progression from beautiful to bad, but that doesn't exist in the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is the most extreme marine environment on the planet, if not the most extreme environment in the world. So, and the boat is very small, and I'm very much alone. There is no help. There's nothing. And the sea is not malevolent. It doesn't care if you're there or not. There's nothing bad about it. So I always viewed it as if it was this nothing. I just happened to be floating on it. So I was standing outside in the cockpit of the boat, waiting for the next storm, which was going to come and just be, again, horrible. And it was if in about 30 seconds, it seems that God had passed his hand. And I'll use that term, God, carefully, as if he had passed his hand over the ocean. And the mood of the ocean changed immediately from one thing to the other. And I had never seen it before, ever. And in that moment, I realized, because I'd read books, I've heard stories about the ocean having moods, and I dismissed that as just nothing, because I'm a technical guy. Things, inanimate objects like chairs don't have moods. It's, the lake doesn't have, the mountain doesn't have a mood. To my way of thinking. And in that instant, when I saw what I would describe as the hand of God pass over the ocean, and it happened in a blink, the mood of the ocean changed. It changed completely. It's as if you were to, people have mood swings and changes all the time, so I don't have to describe that. But the change was so dramatic, it was so incredibly obvious, and it was so beautiful that it just struck me. It struck me right to the core of my being. And it changed my perception immediately. It doesn't happen very often. We need to be skeptical. We need to be curious, about things. And when something impactful like that completely changes your worldview or your belief system, then you got to stand up and take notice of it. So I think that was the most profound event in the circumnavigation. Number one, because it completely changed my perception, my preconceived notion and my perceptions. It happened in an instant, and it came away in almost the same amount of time. So had I not been paying attention, had I not been outside, I would have missed it. Had I not been out there with an open heart and an open mind, I would have missed it. Had I not been humbled, I would have missed it, because I was feeling, quite honestly, I was feeling sorry for myself. So, I was humble, and I was thinking, I hope I can get through this next couple of days, because it's going to be horrible. What's coming at you, and you can't get away from it. So had all those circumstances not conspired, or had not been there at that single time, I would have missed it. So I was humbled and grateful at the same time, and my preconceived notions and perceptions changed immediately about something that was so incredibly profound and important to me at the time.
Wow. What a beautiful one. You see, I love this. The part where you say the hand of God. Wow.
Mm,
You see, I watched in a movie where those guys were sailing across the oceans and the storm hit them, and it was terrible. You see, ever since that time, I said, I am not sure I will ever try this. I
yeah,
tell you,
yeah, yeah,
it's really scary to me. You see, wow, for God
yeah.
to do what He did now, That's amazing. You see, I love it. I love it, and that's a different inspiration again on its own. I
Mm,
tell you, man, that's a
yeah,
great one.
I think
That's a great one.
we could talk for quite a long time about how do you manage fear, because you will be afraid. I mean, if you're not afraid, you're a psychopath, and you shouldn't be there, or at best you're a sociopath, and you probably shouldn't be, and shouldn't be allowed in the presence of in the presence of polite company. But you will be afraid, and you don't have to go to the middle of the ocean to be afraid. You can be afraid to step outside your front door for any number of reasons. There's all kinds of, I hate to use the word phobia, but fear keeps us back from achieving some of our most, well, as we talked about a little bit earlier, fear is probably the primary thing that keeps you from driving towards your purpose and fulfilling that purpose and coming to grips with your destiny, because that's an awful big thing to bite off. If you think that if you can make a contribution, and however small that contribution is, the little voice inside your head that's there all the time will say, "Oh no, you can't do it." You'll hear no way more often than you'll hear yes. You'll hear cannot way more often than you'll hear can. So as soon as you set yourself up to do something important, like to move towards something good, that little voice inside your head will try to stop you. And one of the most effective ways is to keep you afraid. Dealing with fear is a really important life skill, and you can learn to cope with it at any age and at any time.
Yeah, yeah. And I wrote an article on the subject fear, and I love the
Mm-hmm.
part where you mentioned that it impedes people from fulfilling their purpose, and that's just it.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
saddens my heart often. Anytime I
Mm-hmm.
get to remember that there are some books that will never be written, some
Mm-hmm.
invention that will never experience, companies that won't come to life because of fear. It saddens my
Mm-hmm.
heart. And I,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, we have to learn how to come out of it. And it's simply by replacing it with something. You
Mm-hmm.
replace fear with faith, you replace it with courage, with confidence, with trust, and all of these things. So I got that,
Mm-hmm.
but that, and I'm going to take that as a final thought. So for folks who like to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing, or even want to ask some questions that maybe I probably haven't asked you, how can that be possible? Like your contact.
It's really easy to get hold of me. I mean, if you Google my name, there'll be all kinds of stuff there. So, but you can also just get me at bertterhart.com, just my name, no spaces.com. And from there, you can branch out into, all different kinds of things. And if you email me, like the rule I have is you email me, I email you back. So I have lots of email, and I think to me it's just a real privilege to connect with people. I'm always honored and humbled by the conversations I have, because my story is one thing, but everyone I've ever met and everyone I've ever had that I've been fortunate enough to have a conversation with, their stories are absolutely mind-numbingly inspirational to me, because my story to me is actually, it's me, it's kind of boring. Your story is something else entirely. So if you email me, I'll email you back, but you can easily find me at bertterhart.com.